Are maps of the Roman Empire misleading? Whenever you see a map of the Roman Empire, it's usually this one, the empire at its territorial peak in AD 117 at the death of the Emperor Trajan. Hello, my name is Hadley and I'm an archaeologist. In this video we're going to explore why maps like this don't really represent the Roman Empire. It is quite normal for maps to depict the territorial peak of an empire though. We're used to seeing maps of the British Empire like this, and not like this. The Mongolian Empire like this, and not like this. But it is slightly misleading of course, because many of these regions and provinces weren't occupied for as long as maps like these imply. The province of Mesopotamia, roughly modern day Iraq, was occupied for only a couple of years, and only ever briefly reoccupied in parts many years later. Yet in this map, vast swathes of land are painted in red, the universally agreed upon colour for the Roman Empire for some reason. Other provinces, whilst occupied for a very long time from a personal perspective, weren't permanent features of the Roman Empire. Dacia, or modern day Romania roughly, was occupied for about 170 years. It was conquered relatively late in the expansion of the Roman Empire by the Emperor Trajan. It's not a coincidence that maps of the Roman Empire usually draw the year AD 117, the year that the Emperor Trajan died. He was an unusually expansionist emperor, beloved by the Senate, the people and the army, something that all subsequent emperors admired. But his drive for conquest was unique. These subsequent emperors, although they admired Trajan, felt that they had to entrench rather than conquer. Britain was occupied for just over 360 years, conquered in AD 43 to bolster the weak military pedigree of the Emperor Claudius. The occupation of Britain was brutal. During the conquest phase, lasting about 40 years, a good 10% of the entire Roman army was stationed in Britain. The upkeep of those soldiers was placed firmly on the shoulders of the new inhabitants of Britannia, now a Roman province. Italy, the home province, was actually only fully occupied by the Romans for about 750 years. That number is even smaller if you only count the years when Rome was ruled by an emperor. Obviously, I'm not saying that 750 years isn't an extremely long time. It is. But given the long history of ancient Rome, it is surprisingly short, I think. It took the Romans until the mid-3rd century BC to have full control of the Italian peninsula, and that's not even including the northern parts of modern-day Italy, which the Romans of the time didn't consider to be Italia. Instead, it was a province called Gallia Cisalpina. In other words, Gaul this side of the Alps, from the Roman perspective. Only by the time Julius Caesar was dictator in 49 BC, this part of modern-day Italy was merged with Roman Italy. In the long history of Rome, the place or region that was occupied for the longest was actually Greece, or at least what ancient people would have considered to be Greece. This area around the Aegean, but focused on the western mainland. From about 200 BC all the way up until the fall of Constantinople in AD 1453, makes for about 1600 years of Roman occupation, with some major hiccups along the way of course, like the Fourth Crusade, when the Roman Empire was on a 60-year hiatus thanks to the crusading Latins. In many ways this makes Greece, rather than Italy, the home province of the empire, and why maps like this are slightly misleading. Of course, this map does say it is the Roman Empire in AD 117. It's not making any comments about what happened 300 years before or what happened much later in the Roman Empire, what it looked like. But it is a map that is shown in textbooks and on documentaries about Rome in general. Perhaps a map like this would be better and closer to representing the Roman Empire and what it actually looked like. It shows that certain regions were briefly occupied when compared to some of the more core provinces and regions, particularly the region of what the ancients called Greece. This particular design isn't great though. Certain campaigns are lumped into the less than 50 years colour, like the temporary and disastrous campaign of Aelius Gallus into the Hejaz. Northern Scotland along the east coast, despite evidence of Roman forts as far north as Inverness, is not coloured at all, so it's not perfect. All of that being said, just because certain parts of the former Roman Empire were occupied for less time than others doesn't mean that the impact on these places was actually any less important. And actually, Romania is called that because it was part of the Roman Empire, and they speak a Romance language, despite being occupied for about 170 years between the beginning of the 2nd century and the end of the 3rd. Whereas in Greece, they speak Greek and go by the name Hellas, despite being part of the Roman Empire for 1600 years. But it's so much more complex than that, really. With Romania, it wasn't really a case of the inhabitants of the province of Dacia continuing to speak a variant of Latin until the modern day. It's more accurate to say that the local people in the Middle Ages called themselves Romans and spoke a Romance language. More of a general influence of the Roman Empire and less of a direct impact. In regards to the Roman impact on Greece, much of the Eastern Mediterranean during the early Roman period spoke Greek already. It was the lingua franca for trade and travel. Certain Roman institutions did require Latin though. The law court and the army, for example. In the Middle Ages, the Roman Empire, although still ruled by a Roman emperor who called himself Roman, took more of a distinctly Greek character. Slowly, Latin faded in importance and religious ties broke down with the successor states in the West, particularly with the Pope in Rome. This had a huge historical consequence. The people in the Christian West had every incentive to suggest that the East Romans weren't Roman at all. It was their legacy, not the Greeks. So today you will see many descriptions of the Byzantine Empire, despite no one at the time calling the Roman Empire that. Such is the legacy of the Roman Empire. Thank you for watching to the end of the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. I argued in this video that maps like this are slightly misleading because they create a static image of the Roman Empire, frozen in time. Maps like this, although they are quite ugly to be honest with you, and not perfect, they conjure a better image of the Roman Empire from a historical perspective. Let me know what you think though. Should we campaign for maps like this over maps like this?